From the Matrix Home Solutions Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy talking about the Twitter doc dump on Friday, detailing the decisions that led up to the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story before the 2020 election. Both Elon Musk and Matt Taibbi providing useful information to confirm a lot of what we knew or suspected was true, but confirming what's suspected is a useful exercise, knowing as opposed to just surmising. Matt Taibbi's been busy. He also participated in a debate in Toronto last week. He and Douglas Murray versus Michelle Goldberg from the New York Times and Malcolm Gladwell from the New Yorker. Malcolm Gladwell of, Tipping Point and other such books as well. The resolution, be it resolved, you should not trust the mainstream media. And Douglas Murray and Matt Taibbi were on the support side. Support the proposition you should not trust the mainstream media. As if his Twitter thread would not have been evidence enough. But his opening statement, I thought, was interesting. Just a couple of riffs from it. Talks about what the media is today, and this is not new, but it bears repeating. It's not in the business of fact-finding. It's in the business of audience optimization. Instead of starting with the story and following the facts, you start with what pleases your audience and work backward to the story. The overwhelming majority of national media organizations cater to one side or the other. For instance, according to the Pew Center survey from a few years ago, 93% of Fox's audience votes Republican, while in an exactly mirroring phenomenon, MSNBC's audience, 95% votes Democrat. Our colleagues on the other side tonight, he said, represent two once great media organizations. Michelle Goldberg, the Pew survey says the audience for your New York Times is now 91% comprised of Democrats. Malcolm, the last number I could find for the New Yorker was back in 2012, and even then only 9% of the magazine's readers were Republicans. I imagine that number is smaller now. I'm one of them, by the way. This bifurcated system is fundamentally untrustworthy. When you decide in advance to forego half of your potential audience to fulfill the aim of catering to the other half, you're choosing in advance which facts to emphasize and which to downplay. You're also choosing which stories to cover and which ones to avoid based on considerations other than truth or newsworthiness. This is not journalism. It's political entertainment and therefore unreliable. And, despite the fact, as I mentioned before the news, that Taibbi wrote a book critical of Trump.
Right. He's not a big Trump fan.
I mean, the book was called Insane Clown President, just to put an exclamation point on him not being a Trump fan. He writes, I compiled a list of more than 100 of these quote-unquote bombshell stories about Trump that went belly up, from Bountygate to MSNBC saying Russian oligarchs co-signed a loan for Trump to countless others because these stories offend me. A good journalist should always be ashamed of error. It bothers me to see so many of my colleagues so unashamed. And here we are 72 hours after the release of these documents related to Twitter's suppression of the New York Post Hunter Biden story, and they are similarly and still unashamed. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Emma Jo Morris. She is a politics editor at Breitbart News, formerly with the New York Post. She's actually the one who broke the Hunter Biden laptop story. She was able to come into possession of Hunter Biden's laptop, so I'm sure everything that was released on Friday came as no surprise to Emma Jo Morris. Emma Jo, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be on.
Oh, so just rewind us back to, since you were there, since you're the party that's most directly responsible here for producing this piece, getting this information out, or out as best you could. So how did it all go down, you getting in possession of the laptop and the decision to publish the story?
Yeah, I am happy to go back. I look back on it now with nostalgia. Basically, I'm Canadian, and I moved to New York to work at Fox News in 2016, right after I finished university. It was my first job out of university in the summer of 2016. I was a producer for Hannity. And so I moved to New York from Montreal with not many friends, and I started to make friends as I obviously lived here. And one of the people who I became friends with was, we had some mutual friends, and he wasn't in politics, this guy named Vish Burra. He was not in politics. He was my age. He was working at like a computer startup company, but he had a hobby of politics. Like he liked sharing articles and memes and chatting about it and stuff like that. So we became fast friends, actually, and we would go for brunch in New York and just hang out. And that was all the way back in 2016, and we stayed friends. And then eventually Vish got to start working in politics, and he became the producer, the first producer for Bannon's War Room podcast, Steve Bannon. So he starts working for Bannon, and in that time I went to go work at the New York Post as deputy politics editor. So I was the editor for national politics at the New York Post after Hannity. And so we're friends, and we stay friends, and we both quit jobs, and all of a sudden, Rudy gets possession of the hard drive, and he ropes Bannon in because of the material related to the CCP, which is Bannon's big specialty. And then, they're talking about getting it out to the press, and Vish just says, like, I have this great friend who became the editor at the Post, and she's not like a brand name, but she's going to do a good job. And here we are.
Wow.
I mean, obviously there's more to it than that, but that was the initial way that I got on their radar to get the
did you have any pushback from your bosses about doing the story?
Oh, well, there's another big story between the time that Vish, tells Steve Bannon to call me and, we go to publish. I mean, first of all, I didn't believe him when he called me. So Steve Bannon calls me and says, I have a story that's going to change your life. And, I'm like, okay. And he tells me I have Hunter Biden's hard drive. And I was obviously open to that. But then at first, and this has been reported as the experience from other media who have tried to get the hard drive from Rudy and from Bannon. It's like, at first they wanted to just give me certain documents. And I was like, no. And then I start to get skeptical. I'm like, why don't you want to give me the whole hard drive?
Right.
And I'm not accepting certain documents. I need the whole thing. I'm sorry, but I just don't trust a third party. Like, I need to see it with my own eyes, and I wouldn't trust any third party. And so, there's a big back and forth at first about getting to see it and then getting to have it. Eventually, I negotiated my way in to just see it. And then when I went to Rudy's lawyer's house to go look at it for the first time, that was when eyes bugged out. I took a few documents off of it onto a USB drive to show my bosses. And then, yeah, of course, there was a huge war with legal. There was a huge debate inside the New York Post about whether we're doing this, if this is worth it, how we could go about verifying it. It definitely wasn't a layup from the time that I saw it or the time that I heard about it to the time that we published it. There was a lot of negotiating between me and the Post. There was a lot of negotiating at different levels of the Post, and then there was a lot of negotiating at the end between me and Rudy Giuliani to get the hard drive. Rudy was quite cagey with giving that over, and I basically had this conversation with him where he goes, I want you to promise me 6 covers of the New York Post. And I said to Rudy, I was like, hey, if this is everything we think it is, you can have 20 covers of the New York Post. Just give me the hard drive.
And so ultimately he turns this over, and
yes.
And what your forensic computer geeks and so on and so forth, there was enough evidence to substantiate that this was in fact Hunter Biden's laptop to run with the story, I presume.
Well, there were a number of things that led us to feel comfortable with publishing. The first thing was, and I was blasting about this on Twitter this weekend, there was a subpoena. So the computer repair shop guy didn't just go to Rudy Giuliani with this thing. Months before, he went to the FBI with it.
Right.
So Hunter Biden brings in this computer. This guy, it's water damage. This guy has to transfer the hard drive to a new computer for him. That was the service that he was going to provide. And he's going through this computer to transfer the materials, and he realizes that it's like chock full of illegal activity, or what he thinks could be illegal. So he calls Hunter and says, "Your service is done." Hunter doesn't answer, never picks it up. 90 days lapses, which is the standard amount of time that if a product isn't paid for and picked up, that it becomes the possession of the repair shop. So 90 days lapses, and the computer repair shop guy calls the FBI and says, "Hey, I have Hunter Biden's computer. I want you to have this because I'm freaked out." So the FBI comes and takes it and gives him a subpoena to say, like, a subpoena isn't only a forceful request for something. It also serves as like a receipt.
Right.
Like if the FBI takes something, they give you a subpoena in return for it. So we published the subpoena that the computer repair shop guy got. And that was one thing that made us believe that this was real. Another thing that made us believe that this was real was, obviously at News Corp, we had our people look at it, and they had their own criteria for gauging what they thought of it. And then on top of that, we called recipients of these emails and said, "Hi, does this sound familiar?" And read it to them.
And were at least some of the recipients of those emails, they were comfortable enough to say, "Yeah, that's an email I received from Hunter Biden"?
Yeah, you got a lot of clicks,
Yeah, sure.
But we had a few. Yeah.
Well, what do you think was
One of them was Tony Bobulinski.
Oh, yeah. Well, what was the most damaging thing that you think that you uncovered on Hunter Biden's laptop?
The first 2 days of reporting, if we lived in a sane world, that would be a huge problem for a politician, right? I think those are probably the two worst things I found, which is exactly what I published. I have no secrets, It's like everything good that I got, I gave to you. It was, Hunter Biden making arrangements for his benefactors to be having meetings with Joe Biden, and then when he was vice president. And then the second story on that day was, the Obama-Biden White House leaking internal conversations about Ukraine policy to Burisma.
The reaction from the D.C. press corps to what was released on Friday, it can't surprise you very much, although I got to say, I mean, the involvement of James Baker, former general counsel for the FBI, who then went to become deputy counsel for Twitter. I mean, that just, again...
wasn't that just too much? That was something that I focused... Wasn't that just too much? That was something that I focused as well on in my reporting for Breitbart. His little piece was so amazing because he is former counsel for the FBI. He goes on to be deputy counsel for Twitter. This guy is not unfamiliar with a subpoena. And he is talking to them about how they're not sure about whether they should call this a hack and dump or whatever the term that they have is. And I'm sitting there screaming at my computer at Matt Taibbi started saying, "I gave you the subpoena in the first story."
Right. Yeah, but here's the thing about...
have an eye for a federal subpoena and maybe, in that case, which is customary for Twitter, and Matt Taibbi reported this as well, that Twitter called federal law enforcement to say, "Hey, does this check out? Hey, do you know about this? Hey, can you look at this?" That's normal behavior for Twitter. So when they see a federal subpoena in the first story, which I had published, I just told you about that, wouldn't they say, maybe let's, before we go censor this, take 5 seconds and call the FBI?
Well, right, but it's this is where, hey, go talk to the lawyers and get them to give us cover for what we want to do. So this is like,
well, exactly.
Caution is warranted. You don't have to take a position, but just say caution is warranted so we have cover to suppress.
Exactly. Well, that's what this was. But it was, especially by James Baker, willful ignorance in order to censor.
Well, the other thing about that too, and I think this was Miranda Devine's reporting, at the Post. This in the run up to the November 2020 election, you had FBI regularly meeting, weekly meetings with Twitter people and telling them that this was going to happen, essentially. And so be ready for it, because this is, as you said, this is going to be a hack and dump. We have good information that a hack and dump is coming, and it may be related to Hunter Biden and so on and so forth. So they're setting them up, Twitter, the entire time to say, oh, this is a Russian disinformation campaign. And so when it comes out, if and when it comes out, make sure you spike it.
Well, right. And that's the thing, and that's what I'm waiting for. There's a second dump apparently coming by Barry White in, I don't know, I mean, Elon Musk apparently gave her the documents on Saturday. I would expect it today or tomorrow, but there is apparently more coming on this, and that's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for the meetings with the intelligence community, which we know happened. We know through Miranda's reporting, that's right, that what she was reporting on was testimony by Yoel Roth, who is the big guy for trust and safety at Twitter. She was also reporting on the testimony given to attorneys general from Missouri and Louisiana, if I'm not mistaken, on their case in big tech, and also based on what we know from Mark Zuckerberg, who said on the Joe Rogan Experience about a month ago that he casually mentions, I was having meetings with the intelligence community and with the FBI. In the lead up to the election, and they were warning me about Russian disinformation, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So we know that these meetings are going on. All we need is the receipts. And that seems to be a lot of what's going on right now. It's like, it's been so much time since this event actually happened 2 years ago that we have been able to basically piece together, some semblance of what happened, and what these documents are that Elon Musk are revealing is just color and a firm story as to what happened.
And is this is it your understanding? Is this all Elon Musk just releasing these documents through people like Barry Weiss and Matt Taibi, or is this also like Taibi having his own internal sources that were leaking information to him?
I don't know.
Okay,
but
I was looking for clarity on that.
Elon Musk is saying, and that's why it seems like that's why he's taking Taibi and Barry Weiss. Is these are people who are very familiar with the media and are also very familiar with media malpractice and are very skeptical of media and legacy media, but who are also not, firmly on the right.
Right.
I think that these are journalists that appear to me like Elon Musk is making his best effort to really have this be interpreted as credible by everybody possible. Anybody who is going to be open to this information, even remotely.
She is Emma Jo Morris, politics editor at Breitbart News, formerly with the New York Post, as we were discussing. Emma Jo Morris, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's what Chicago is talking about. It's Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy on AM 560. The Answer.
It seems like everyone is on a complicated diet these days. Gluten-free, keto, metabolic, sugar-free. And with these diets comes special dietary protocol and food products. You can find plenty of advice on your social media sites, but you need expertise to purchase the right food items. A visit to Lil's Dietary Specialty Shop is necessary to shop the best food choices for a medical diet or health plan. Lil's Dietary Specialty Shop stocks all the hard-to-find foods you're looking for, like wheat and dairy alternatives, sugar-free baking mixes,